All good things come to an end, and Washington's winning streak at home ends at the hands of the Ohio State Buckeyes.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff. That's Lars Hanson. He writes with me over at Huskies Wire. Thanks for making this your first watch or first listen of the day, as we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And this episode is brought to you by Mazda. Like our players, we sweat every detail, because when you make every move count, pulling off the unexpected is only the beginning. Stay tuned later for highlights in this week's Moving the Game Forward, Mazda, Move, and Be Moved. And just a quick reminder to all you everydayers out there, wherever you're getting this podcast, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, wherever that might be, make sure to click that subscribe button, click the little bell as well, so you don't miss when we go live like this. And if you're on the audio only side of things, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review, as it does really help us out a lot. Now, Lars, unfortunately, Washington's winning streak at home does come to an end at 22 straight games at the hands of the number one Ohio State Buckeyes. We're going to talk about some of the things that, maybe aren't so negative about this game a little bit later on. We got to talk about some injuries, because Washington suffered a lot of bad injury luck in this game and leading up to this game as well. But you look at this game, honestly, I feel like you could go either way with this. I've got a lot of things I'm mad about, a lot of things I'm not super mad about. Your first thought with this game is
progress. I think when you look at the totality of this game, they didn't get boat race. They didn't get completely outclassed in the game. A lot of, as Jonah Coleman said after the game, self-inflicted wounds led to the close-ish result in this game, where you look at 24-6, sounds like it's not a blowout, but it doesn't sound great, because it means you didn't get a touchdown or you missed your extra point, one of the two, whichever one you want to go with there. But obviously Washington doesn't find the end zone for the first time this season. And it was kind of the litmus test that we thought it might be, where, Ohio State's defense really challenged Washington at times, but also Dezmen was Dezmen. I think it was you after the game asked him, the 14 straight completions. That was significant. Still ends up, I think of 3 or 4 incompletions on the day, I want to say, at the end of the game. But it was a good game for Dezmen.
Yeah, 82%.
And then no turnover. So again, when we knocked on wood before, you said, hey, you're going to jinx it. Again, Dezmen still didn't turn it over. Now, did get sacked 6 times, so you're a little bit worried. Maybe the trenches might be an issue. And I think on the totality, you see it was better than what it was last season, but there's still a ways to go.
Absolutely. That is the biggest thing right there. Is there are a lot of things that I want to talk about, like especially right off the top, that are, come on, man. Like really, like the field goal, the fake field goal on 4th and 13, 14, whatever that was. You look at that, and that is, are we serious? Like that's really the decision you want to go. And Jedd Fisch said after the game that there was a look that they thought they saw all week that they want to take advantage of there on 4th and 14. That's just ridiculous. It's like straight up. It is, where if you want to go for it and you want to try to put points on the board with a 45-yard field goal, I would trust Greater Gross in that range. But also, like, if you want to go for it, even on 4th and long, whatever, that's fine. Do it with Dezmen Williams. Like that's the one thing I want to say there. I want to save the penalty stuff for a little bit later on, because that's not why you lost this game. That's like, it has nothing to do with that. You lost this game because Ohio State is just straight up better than you. And that's okay. They are the number one team in the country, and they came out and they showed you exactly why. Our good buddy Jake Butt came on the show earlier this week, and one of the things that he said was this is going to be a big test for them to show that they can go on the road and show that they can win against a really tough team. And for a majority of this game, it was a one-possession game, and Washington did a really good job hanging and keeping themselves in there and showing a lot of progress, like you said, from last season. Is it enough to make sure that this is an elite college football playoff contending team? No, absolutely not. But is it enough to say that you can just look at this game from just 1,000 feet up and say that's a better team than last year? 100%. And I think that's something that's really, really important, because I think that a lot of the play calling was frustrating in this game, especially down in the red zone. I know some people are frustrated by the lack of carries for Jonah. I feel like there were a couple of drives where a lot of that was due to just going up tempo and just not wanting to let Ohio State substitute and trying to tire their defense out a little bit. But also at the same point, that defense shows you why it's elite, why it's the number one scoring defense in the country. Like they did all of those things today. And there is a certain point of frustration that you can look at from the Washington side of things. And I want to make sure we get into all these things and say, that was bad. That was bad. That was bad. But you also have to look on the other sideline and tip your cap and say, there are so many NFL guys on the other side of that field that Washington is still trying to build up to. And Washington has a fair amount of their own NFL guys, but not as many right now.
Absolutely. I mean, you hit the nail on the head where we talked about it coming into the game. Jedd has to get out of his own way. And to an extent, he didn't. Flat out. Just did not get out of his own way. Now, was it as atrocious as the speed option play last year against Wazoo? The field goal was.
So.
The fake was, but there were a number of plays where, the offensive line kind of broke down a little bit. I mean, Damon had time, a lot of those plays, but that's, is it, again, now your receivers aren't getting separation, where I asked Jedd after the game about going 1 for 11 on third down, which I'm still, by the way, trying to figure out when was the last time UW ended up with just 1 third down conversion in the game. And you look at it and say, it's clearly been a while. So there was a lot of different reasons why they were in the position they were in. But yet you peel back the curtain and it's still 7-3 at halftime, where even that, it could be 3-0 at halftime in your Washington. Maybe the thing that changed for me was the second half, where you talk about Ohio State's first drive in the third quarter that took up almost 8 minutes of clock.
Yeah.
You basically just delete the third quarter at that point, and now you're talking about being down 14-3 going into the fourth quarter, it felt like. And that's where, with that separation, you don't have as much talent to make up that gap as quickly.
But that's the thing though, like, because you're right that it's hard to make up that gap without talent. But at the same point, you got in the red zone in like 5 plays. They moved the ball quickly and efficiently down that field. There's the 18-yarder Dezmen Roebuck, 23 yards to Decker DeGraff on that same drive very, very quickly after that. So all of a sudden you were in the red area and you had an opportunity to score. And this defense showed up in that standpoint where they out-physicaled you. The Carver Willis injury, I don't want to jump the gun here, but that was really crushing for this offensive line. Like in the first half, I was very, very happy with how this offensive line looked. And then after Carver went down, there was a very noticeable difference. And I don't say that to knock Maximus McCree. That's why Carver was brought in here, to be a steadying force along this offensive line. And he absolutely has been. And I think that was the most glaring difference in Washington's offense from the first half to the second. There were still play calling questions. There were still execution issues, but that changed so much in this game. And I don't think that can go understated. And there were a couple of other things, that really did change this game. When I look at just calling plays deep in the red zone, you weren't able to convert in short yardage situations. That goes back to being 1 of 11 on third down as well, where Ohio State did a great job getting off the field. But I look at just the totality of this game, and it was that is the number 1 team in the country for a reason. And you can look at it and slice it up however many different ways you want. And for anybody who listened to Jedd Fisch's press conference after the game, I saw a fair amount of Husky fans saying they were really frustrated for one reason or another. And again, there are reasons to be. But I think the overall message is this is a much better team last year and a team that is still growing and moving forward. And there are so many reasons to be excited about so many different little pieces of this roster too.
There is, but it's looking at it from a glass half full versus glass half empty point of view, where it's good to do that, but it can't be at the detriment of, well, how much are you still going to grow? Because Carver's a senior, so Carver's not coming back. You have to solve that left tackle problem, which again, that gets into a longer discussion about Cody Green in the future and things like that, which you're addressing. But when you look at Ohio State, like you mentioned it, it's a great point. That sideline, that depth chart, like you mentioned it in the press box. We barely heard Caleb Downs' name today, and yet as a unit, collectively, Ohio State's defense was better. And I think
they're much better.
I think that speaks to, you could have a couple of nice pieces, but can it all work together? And that's not – if Tacario Davis played today, that doesn't change the thing, honestly. Like, it really, to me, it doesn't. And you look at, Jeremiah Smith, where I don't know who I was telling this to on the sideline right as the game was getting done, but it's not like he went for, 15 and 225 and 4 touchdowns. It wasn't like you got destroyed, but it really was, that run game, just a ground and pound, 4 or 5 yards of carry, really did seem to chip away. And ironically, I forgot what time of the game it was. It might have been halftime, but it was yards per play. I think Ohio State was 5.5 and UW was 5.2. So you're right there. But that 0.3 percentage gap is just enough to where when you have that mistake on top of that mistake on top of that mistake and that play calling question, those are the things that Ryan Day didn't have and the things that Jedd Fisch did. And I think when you talk about where we see UW in 2026, that's another step that they can take. And so you've taken a big step, but you need to continue taking those big steps in the Big Ten.
There's still very clearly a gap from where they are right now to where they need to be to compete consistently for a Big Ten championship. And Lars, another big part of that really doesn't help is there were a lot of injuries, especially on the defensive side. And we'll get to that right after a message from our good friends over at Mazda. This episode is brought to you by Mazda's Moving the Game Forward. For those who believe it's not just about playing the game, it's about redefining it. There are moments that do more than put points on the board. They move crowds, move culture, and keep moving the game forward. This week's moment that moved the game forward was early on. That forced fumble from Quentin Moore on special teams was a phenomenal play. It really seemed to change the momentum there in the game early on, and it felt like Washington had an opportunity to capture a lot of it. Obviously, didn't result in a win at the end of the day, but that was a clutch play that Jedd Fisch and this coaching staff have been talking about for weeks in terms of forcing turnovers and trying to get ahead on the scoreboard. But, didn't move the game forward this week, but Washington is moving forward every single week, and they continue to get better. When you follow what moves you, the unexpected is only the beginning. And just like there's more to every highlight, there's more to a Mazda vehicle. Mazda, move and be moved. So before we dive into a lot of the injuries, I want to talk about Tacario Davis here for a second, because when we, the whole week leading up to this game, I had heard a lot from people around the building saying, sounds like he's going to play. They definitely wanted to play. And Jedd Fisch addressed that in the post-game press conference, said he went through a full practice on Thursday, went through the walkthrough on Friday. We worked him out before the game on Saturday. And it was, I'm not going to lie, watching just the aftermath of the post-game workout was heartbreaking when you look at the other side of what football is, that not everybody always gets a chance to see. I saw Tacario walking off the field, and he was still kind of holding his chest rib cage area where he did get injured a couple of weeks ago against UC Davis, and he had his head down and was practically in tears, where it just looked like he wasn't going to get a chance to play. Obviously, Pete Thamel from ESPN reported that earlier in the morning, and it was something where I know a lot of Husky fans are like, yeah, that's the one guy who we really want to see get up and go. And would he have changed this game in a much bigger way? He certainly would have had an impact on Washington's defense, but it was just the piling up over the course of the game. Rahshawn Clark, obviously out today as well. Buddah Al-Uqdah. The return of Jacob Manu was really nice. I thought he had a solid day for someone who is less than a year removed from a torn ACL that he suffered in Arizona. And then, of course, Zach Durfee goes down. We see him in a sling after the game. Jedd Fisch said he's dealing with an elbow injury, and Carver Willis goes down as well, said he's dealing with a knee. For those two guys, Jedd said after the game that they're going to be MRIs tomorrow, and we should have a more clear picture on what those injuries look like on Monday. But all of these things piling up, I feel like, especially when you look at the competitiveness of the game as it went on, it was very clear that these injuries were taking a toll, especially on a defensive line that was not getting much pressure.
Yeah, it was kind of death by 1,000 cuts or death by 1,000 punches, where there's no single shot that's going to get you, but all of them collectively ended up sinking the ship. And, speaking of Carver, watching him walk off the field after the game, it was good to see him walk off the field and no brace, no nothing like that, but he was very gingerly moving, I can put it that way. And so you wonder, if he, you don't want to speculate, but if he happens to miss a couple of weeks, do you feel confident going on the road against Maryland with Max McCree? There's a great story. There's a great story there, by the way, because that's where Max began his career in the Big Ten. But you look in hindsight, you're probably not as confident, like you just said. And you look at Zach Durfee, that's a tough one for me, because we all know what he's been through, his eligibility thing. Every time he talks to the media, it's always, hey, I haven't really had a ton of chances here because of X, Y, and Z reasons. Last season with the toes, multiple, toe injuries that ended up being really gnarly. It's unfortunate that he went out as well, because that was the guy where, just in terms of a leadership element, in terms of being able to set the run and blitz, get after the passer, that element was significantly missed. And you just add up, Buddah obviously being the heartbeat, and the depth as well with Rahshawn also not being out there. But I didn't feel like Rahshawn's was felt as much. It was really the run game where it was more felt. And I think that's why Durfee kind of hits home for me, because to me, you think about his impact in the run really didn't get as much credit as he deserved last season. And I think that it's carried over to this season. And you look behind him, Isaiah Ward's not the same type of guy. Jacob Lane was good. He got a sack as well. But other than that, it's, you're still looking for somebody along the defensive line. I mean, I passed by Derek Coleman Bruce again before the game kicked off. And it's like, hey, boy, can you go suit up at this point? Like, they need some bodies out there. And, Derek's going to be great, but he's still going to be a freshman next season. So when you're looking down the line, like, you still don't have that true depth and experience that you would like to have, especially at edge and along the defensive line.
No, and that's one of the biggest things where the talent gap continues to show up, where one of the biggest things with this defensive line, especially along the interior, was the thought of, and Javon Parker certainly played a factor in this as well as he continues to recover from a torn Achilles, but you were hoping that rotation of bodies was going to help you get pressure. But it's at its best when you have someone who's doing that off the edge, as Zach Durfee showed last week against Washington State. obviously, again, this is a much different level of competition, and you have to feel for the kid. You really, really do, where it looked like a somewhat unfortunate injury. It kind of looked like he was holding his forearm, and again, Jedd Fisch called it an elbow injury, so you have to just kind of see what happens there. But that's someone who has worked really, really hard to get to this point and just continues to suffer setback after setback, and it's always sad to see that. You never want to. But one thing I want to talk about in terms of this injury sort of light is Washington hurt itself at so many different points of penalties in this game, where you look at the number at the end of the game and it's not a huge number. It's 5 for like 50 something yards, but the 2 on the first drive were just ridiculous, where Jedd Fisch was asked about the sideline infraction call on the second drive of the game. And he said that the reason it was called was the referee stated that they ran into an assistant coach, and we didn't see that. Didn't really see what happened, but apparently the referee was backpedaling and ran into somebody, and that's a penalty. Jedd, a couple plays later, is still heated about it and runs out onto the field between plays to let one of the other officials have it. I'm presuming it was the official who threw the flag. That's one of those things where I understand standing up for your guys and everything, and I will always fully back that, especially as a baseball guy myself who loves to see a manager get a toss every once in a while. That's one of those moments where you have to understand the situation, understand the opponent, and you cannot be taking a flag in that situation for any reason. And especially after a big play to Dezmen Roebuck, a play before, all of a sudden you're just set back and you're still inside the 10-yard line.
It's kind of ironic because as a coach, you would tell the player in that scenario, we can't afford that. But yet the coach is never above coach. And I think Jedd, almost in a way, that's kind of how he got in his way today, where early on you could sense like, I don't know if Jedd's fully got it. We're not questioning Jedd as a coach per se, but at these type of games, those type of moments, you have to find a cooler head. These cliche cooler heads have to prevail here. It made me think back to the Vincent Holmes one against Rutgers, where how do you have that happen? And it's, if you're Jedd, lose your what, but go lose it in the locker room at halftime. Go feed it into the players. Say, you know what, we give them a message that they need to come out with this fire and passion and all those sorts of things. Let them have it, or let the referees have it, during the TV timeout, where you can find it. There's a time and a place for everything to be said. But it goes back to what we had said about the Washington State game in a sense, where the penalties were felt. There's not a massive, you're not talking 12 for 125 or whatever the case may be. But that was my summation, at least in the first half, where you looked at every single one of those was felt. The legal snap by Landon Hatchett, all those sorts of things ended up
having 3 false starts on the same drive was crazy.
At home. And that's the thing that we're getting at. Where if this game was in Columbus, totally get it. You got 100 whatever in the shoe, makes total sense. And there was a decent amount of Ohio State fans that are worth kind of noting that.
Credit to them, by the way. They did show out.
And I have seen probably worth shouting out some UW fans, maybe don't resell your tickets to Ohio State fans. That might be something to approach later on down the line. But when you think about, there wasn't a reason why UW should have that many false starts. The line has been together a while now. And I think it was everybody along the left side, Mills, Hatchett, and Carver at least had one false start.
It was both Hatchets and Carver Willis in this game. Yeah, that's right. So I want to dive into that a little bit more. Sorry, I just think that there's one other thing that needs to be noted that I think really did shift the momentum in the game. I don't think that if this play doesn't get called, Washington goes on to win this game. But it is absolutely worth noting that absolutely horrendous roughing the passer call on Tacario Davis on what 2nd and 20 should have been 3rd and 20. All of a sudden it's first and 10 in the red zone. Like that was a truly game-changing penalty. And I had a couple people who were watching the broadcast. Obviously, we don't get the audio of that in the press box, saying that Gene Steratore was ripping the refs for that call as well. It's not an excuse, and you didn't lose the game because of that one particular call. As we've been discussing, there are several things that led up to that point, but that penalty call in and of itself was inexcusable and absolutely insane. That was an insane call.
Made me think back to, I almost missed the Pac-12 refs in that moment, where they would have some egregious calls, but it never seemed to be actually the ones that deserved to be called, like the Porter Gustin hitting whatever Wazoo quarterback it was, and no flag being thrown on roughing the passer. Like that was the type of thing where, okay, you can have whatever you can do, but yeah, that one was in a way kind of a summation of the day, where no matter what you tried to do, nothing was going to work. It really, at the end, when you got into that 3rd and 4th quarter, it just kind of seemed like you can't help yourself. The refs aren't going to help you, and Ohio State's just too good. I think all three kind of factored in together to where, kind of closing together with injuries. You can hurt about it, But like you said, it didn't lose you the game. I think the first half ones with that 3 on the first drive, the second drive, and then Jedd's unsportsmanlike. The tie one was just egregious for a different reason. But again, it didn't lose you the game, like you said.
No, it really didn't. I think one thing that you can look at and say at the end that really did lose you the game is the talent gap and the depth that Ohio State can show, especially on the defensive side of the ball. And that's really, really important to note, because I think as we move on here, one thing that I came away with is we were looking for a second receiver to step up for Washington. And I think they might have found one in Dezmen Roebuck. And we'll get to that right after a message from our good friends over at DoorDash. It's almost the weekend. Time to look back and crown this week's MVP on Who Delivered, powered by DoorDash. Just like you can win every Saturday with DoorDash streaks, saving more every time you ordered, these players delivered when it mattered most. Let's break it down. For Washington, Demond Williams Jr. delivered in a big way. I think this week he really impressed against a top-tier defense, completing 82% of his passes. He didn't get into the end zone as Ohio State's defense really buckled down in the red zone, but Demond was impressive. When the pressure was on, he came through, no hesitation, no delay. And if you've been watching week after week, this performance wasn't a fluke. Demond is on a streak. And just like Demond delivered for the Huskies, DoorDash delivers your Saturdays. With DoorDash streaks, you save every Saturday you order, stack it up all season, and you can save up to $250, including $100 in DoorDash credits. Order this Saturday. Keep the streak alive. Fuel your game day only with DoorDash. Terms apply. Promo period through November 18th. We've also got a message from our good friends over at 5 Hour Energy. Caffeine just got a flavor upgrade. 5 Hour Energy shots deliver tasty caffeine in 17 bold flavors. Each 2-ounce shot packs the caffeine of a premium's 12-ounce cup of coffee, plus B vitamins and nutrients with 0 sugar and 0 crashes. What I love most is how portable they are. Big taste, tiny shot, you can take it anywhere and get that boost when you need it, which is perfect for a day like today. We've been working all day. I've been at Husky Stadium since about 8 a.m. and a 5 Hour Energy is a perfect way to help you refresh and get the boost you need to get through the day. And honestly, I love how fast they kick in and the fact that it's sugar-free, so I don't have to worry about crashing later. Enough with boring, flavorless caffeine. It's time to give your caffeine a flavor upgrade with 5 Hour Energy shots. Get the favorites you love or be bold and try something new in-store and online at www.5hourenergy.com or Amazon today. Lars, Dezmen Roebuck was so impressive today. Just some of the diving plays he was able to make. Those were some of the things that we were talking about throughout fall camp with a guy like this who showed up in the middle of June for leap and late enrollee and everything like that. And to lead Washington in receiving today. 4 catches, 58 yards. Some of the plays he was able to make, just the feel that he has, what to sit down in zones and just know where the open spots on the field are just some of the things that we got to see throughout fall camp that were really impressive. And I think in a game like this, against an opponent like this, as we continue to look for Omari Evans, who I think had a really solid day. Denzel Boston was clearly the focal point of the Ohio State secondary. Decker DeGraff had a couple of nice grabs. As we continue to look for this passing offense to find that secondary option, Dezmen, even as a true freshman today, stepped up and showed against one of the best defenses in the nation that he can be a legitimate player in this conference.
Absolutely. I mean, again, it reminds me of Hunter Renfrow, Julian Edelman, just someone who knows how to get open, a coach's son, if you will. And it's one guy that when you look back at that class, was probably the most overlooked. If you think about it,
Absolutely.
When you look at the 5 guys that they signed, the last guy you would have picked would be Dezmen. I know fault of his own, but again, you look at the height, you look at all those sorts of things. But it was something we talked about when he committed. Look at the production. Look at the, just trust the evaluation. And it's not a guy that's going to put up numbers because he's playing against scrubs. Arizona has good talent. And I think Jedd and those guys know how to evaluate talent, certainly. And so to have him emerge as that number 2 guy is not surprising. But it's just a matter of, again, when you still say your number 2 guy is a freshman. Like that's to me where you're not – if Jeremiah Smith is that guy, it's a completely different discussion. And no slight to Dezmen to compare. I'm not comparing him to Jeremiah Smith here. But I'm just saying, like, to have that 1A, 1B, you don't have the Roman, Jalen show. It's the Denzel, and then there's a little bit of a gap, and Dezmen, and then there's another gap there, and then there's a bunch of guys that you could pick from, but nobody that's truly solidified themselves. It's just hard in a game like this when you don't find the end zone to truly believe that. But no doubt, like, when you look to the future, and certainly 2026 and obviously the rest of the season, Dezmen's going to be a guy that plays in every game. He's going to find, barring a surprise here at this point, there's no way he's not going to factor in every game. It's just a matter of, can you still have somebody else emerge? Like when Rashid Williams comes back, I still think Rasheed's going to have a factor in this offense. It can't just be the two wide receiver system that Jedd's been known for with Dezmen and Denzel. That's great, but you still need that third, fourth release valve, whether it's Decker, Rasheed, Kevin Green still here. You look at all those guys, like somebody's got to still step up in that sense as well.
I think it has to be Omari Evans more so than anybody else. And I think some of the plays we saw from him today, like that was a really nice move that he tried to make, and obviously his knee hit the ground, so it doesn't count. But there are so many different things that he showed in this game where it's okay. Yeah, this is why you brought him in. And I think they're still trying to ramp him up after he missed so much time towards the end of camp and everything with the injury that kept him out through the first 2 games as well. And that might be part of it. But at the same point, this is something where in a game like this, you might want to try to unleash him a little bit more. So I'm curious to see what his usage looks like over the next week or 2 weeks. But another guy who I think is really important to talk about, especially in the wake of all the injuries, I mentioned him briefly a few minutes ago, that's Jacob Manu. I think Jacob Manu, for somebody who, again, like I said, is less than a year removed from a torn ACL, to come in this game and even just have 3 tackles, it was really solid because you were looking for a veteran guy like this to help step up in the linebacker room, where I think Devin Bryant had a solid day. I think there's still, he's a very good run defender right now, but is still coming along in the pass coverage area where obviously last week he gets caught with his eyes in the backfield and gives up the touchdown to Washington State. There's still a lot of room for progression for a guy like that, but having a guy like Jacob back in the mix is really nice because I think him and X-Ray Alexander was really clutch in some of those short yardage scenarios today. I was very impressed with what we saw from him too. And having that level of linebacker play is going to be really, really helpful in this conference as the weeks go on. And I think there's a lot to like, and it's why you brought in so many veteran guys. And I think I'm in so many group chats at this point. I know a friend of mine brought this up. It also showed the need for a guy like Zadrius Randy-Saleh, who's just such a good athlete who can play in the middle of the field, where there are a lot of things to like about this group. And I think that it's certainly a better unit than it was from top to bottom last season, but it also still has a long way to go. And I think that seeing Jacob and seeing what he looked like in game 1 is a promising start.
Absolutely. It's why, like you said, it's why you brought in the veteran presence, because you don't want to hinder Zadrius moving forward, because he's absolutely going to be the guy at the middle of this defense, or even outside, depending on where you want to line him up, because obviously Zadrius is going to have an impact at Washington over the next 3 to 4 years. But with all that being said, there's still the need of a veteran presence. And so having Jacob come in for his first game in game 4, now the curious thing is, does he play the rest of the season? With Buddah certainly being out, that kind of factors a little more. Or do you say, okay, well, we still have Devin, we still have X, we still got a couple of other options here. Maybe we kind of just see where Jacob goes from here. That part to me is, kind of where I'm intrigued most. But for me, it also kind of starts with, you need that exact same level along the defensive line, and certainly in the heart of that defense, where, yeah, you got the bodies with Simone Peppa, Logan Sagapalo, but we really haven't seen them shine through as much as we thought they might. And I think that, to me, like we saw it today in the run game, getting 4 or 5 yards to carry is kind of, a little bit surprising in Corona. You're not going to win with that. So being able to get off the field and things like that along the defense line will help the linebackers in that regard. And in a way, almost kind of, flipping the script on that, because I like the thing with Jacob, but it almost made me think of Tacario. And when you look at Tacario Davis and Dylan Robinson, where Dylan, I think, had a phenomenal day, but you still need that veteran presence with Tacario Davis and Ephesians Price off. But at the same, it's kind of this weird, you're leveling up and trying to pull guys along at the same point, where you need those veterans to be able to be starters and contributors. But Jedd is absolutely going to play the freshman, and he knows, by the way, bringing in the talent. He is bringing in the talent from the high school ranks, but then allowing those guys to mature, and how quickly can they mature? Not everybody's Dezmen Roebuck. So being able to find that balance is going to be tricky the rest of the season, but they absolutely have the pieces to do it.
So I want to talk about Dylan Robinson. I'm glad you brought him up, because there is no worse way to get thrown into the fire with your first career start than against this tandem of outside receivers and Carnell Tate and Jeremiah Smith. And I think for what he was asked to do, Dylan did a really nice job, where obviously it's not the numbers that he had last week with a TFL and a forced fumble, but I look at what he did for the majority of the game. He did a really solid job. I think one thing, if you really want to nitpick with him, is you have to go back and watch the film to really just see who would wind up being credited to. But on that all-out blitz where Jeremiah Smith scored the 18-yard touchdown at the end of the half, our good buddy Alex Katzen pointed this out to me, it was zone coverage on the back end, but he was the guy furthest outside. So either he or I think Leroy Bryant was next to him. Somebody needs to identify just the crossing route, the whole drag route that Jeremiah Smith was running and run with him and leave their man and leave their zone to go make a play. And if it's Dylan, I'm not saying it is because, again, you need to go back and watch the film to be 100% sure. But when you go back and you look at a play like that, those are the things where Dylan has already shown he can play at a high level. Those are the kinds of plays he needs to continue to make to show, yeah, I can be an elite corner in this conference because he has the size, the physical traits to be able to do that. But there's still another level to go, which is fine. This is his first career start as a true freshman in a game where, Tacario Davis was ruled out like really late on, and Rahshawn Clark obviously couldn't play as well. And I feel like he might have been the guy that they would have asked to start on the outside. So there's still a lot to look at there, but on that particular play, I'm still really excited about what Dylan can do. And when you go back and you watch him in man coverage, there are certainly a lot of things to like. He's so physical and he's so strong. He's already heavier than Tacario, something that Ryan Walters pointed out earlier in the week. But there's still growth to do, but the track that he is on is really, really exciting.
See, that play was intriguing to me because, correct me if I'm wrong, but Mikal was the one coming and bringing that extra pressure on that play, correct?
On that play, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that to me was the tough part about Ryan Walters' defense, if you were. We know he's going to blitz. We know he's going to bring that pressure. Problem is, when that pressure doesn't get home, someone's getting burned on the outside. And I think that was kind of you live by the pressure, you die by the pressure. And that one was one where you got burned. And, I don't hate it, but I do wonder, Ryan Walters even said it, earlier this week where he's like, well, yeah, you'd be crazy to not adapt. You have to always be changing your thing. You can't be stuck in your ways. I wonder if that play, because again, that play itself didn't lose you the game, but I wonder if those type of plays where if you hold Ohio State to a field goal, does that change the momentum going into the second half? Does that alter anything in any capacity? Because maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. But I just wonder, are those the questions that Ryan Walters and the staff are going to be asking themselves from plays like that from this game? Or do you still say, we're still going to bring the pressure, we're still going to bet on ourselves, and we'll see what happens?
I think that's just one of those teaching moments sort of things. And that was kind of how Jedd Fisch wrapped up this press conferences. There's still a lot to learn from this game. And I feel like we should end on this note. There's still a lot to learn from this game. And this coaching staff, and it's not just Jedd who was saying this. Jonah Coleman gave us a really nice quote. He said, that's the number one team in the country right there. And for a big just portion of this game, it was a one possession game. And he said, if that's the number one team, then we're a hell of a good team too, because we were able to hang with them for a good majority of this contest. And we feel very good about where we are right now. And then you look down the line of the schedule. You have Maryland, where let's see what the injuries look like. But you go to Maryland this next week, and then you come home and play Rutgers on a short week. If you can rebound and just get 2 more wins on your schedule right then and there, great. I feel like you're just sitting in a really nice spot, injuries or not, ahead of the Michigan game. And I still think that there is a lot to be excited about with this team, and they're on the right trajectory. It's just a matter of a little bit of patience sometimes. And Lars, with that being said, as always, thank you so much for being here. Thank you to every day tuning in. We really do appreciate your support. If you like what we have to offer with these live streams and everything like that, please make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcast. So that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're there. We're everywhere. We're updating this channel with new content every single day. So please make sure you click that like button, click that little bell so you miss when we post a new show. Plus, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, drop right down below in the comment section. And if you're audio only, please, if it's a 5-star review, as it does help us out a lot. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll talk to you on Monday.